trucked to the sawmills. The Canada of the Mounties, of fur trappers and lumberjacks, is really a thing of the past. Spitsbergen, just 500 miles from the North Pole, is one of the world's least visited places. This summer, the Odyssey film crew headed north with a party of young explorers to the land of the midnight sun.
The Vikings sailed up these fjords in the 12th century. 400 years later, a Dutch explorer landed here and called it Spitsbergen. Then came the whalers and sealers, whose traces still remain. In the summer of 1987, a party of young British explorers have made camp in this beautiful lost world. They are here to practice science and to share a different kind of adventure.
Yeah, when I told my friends at school, they thought I was completely mad. They're all going off to the south of France, and I was trucking off to the Arctic for 6 weeks.
Well, you can watch there, but it's not a true representation of it.
We left Samson, it was blazing hot sunshine. We were on our shorts and T-shirt until we reached Longyearbyen, and suddenly the cold hit us, and we were sort of plunged into sort of oblivion for about the next 10 hours, thinking, why the hell have we come here?
Apart from the bread, there's nothing really much to miss. Buttered toast, I'd kill for.
For the youngsters, this is unfamiliar terrain. But expedition leader Chris Furs is a seasoned polar explorer.
The young people we take are aged 17 to 19, and I think that 6 weeks long experience is a tremendous thing. It's the first time any of them will have been that long out of civilization, without any mail, without any contact, without any shops to go to. Everything they need, they must have brought already. I think for anybody, they find out more about themselves, and if they enjoy it, fine. If they don't, they'll never do it again. I think we'll probably find of the young ones we got, about a third will do the same sort of thing again. It'll be better for them. So about 2/3 will never do it again, but it'll be one experience they've had that they'll always remember. The first aim of the expedition is to give the youngsters expedition experience. One of these things that you think of sending them out in snowstorms with no shoes on and things, but it is actually to build and develop their character.
The first time we came up on the glacier, thick mist down, you just couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. So you didn't know whether you were heading towards a crevasse or a meltwater stream, and you were actually on top of the thing before you actually knew it was there. I was a bit eerie in this mist. It's quite a dangerous area to be in.
It's really 7 small expeditions. Each of the groups has 2 leaders and about 9 youngsters, and they're running their own expedition. What really brought them is just a straight adventure. If I was 18, that's exactly what it would be for me.
It's a chance of a lifetime, really, to come to the Arctic and be in these sort of conditions. They're that much more extreme, and also putting to use all of the skills you've learnt in climbing and skiing and things at home. And then suddenly you put in this environment, you step off a nice warm plane, out of the door, down the steps, and it suddenly hits you, the cold. And just to come from all those comforts and then be thrown here and spend 6 weeks in a tent in these conditions, doing all of this science work. Incredible experience.
Even in these summer months, Spitsbergen, 850 miles inside the Arctic Circle, has unpredictable weather, although the sun will not set during their 6 weeks here. This is one of the world's last wildernesses, and it's the spectacular geology, especially the unique glacier formations, that has drawn the expedition here.
It's cold.
We've got a glaciology group on the side glacier in the Spitsbergen, and they're actually using evidence of the moraines and ice cores to determine what's happened over the last 100 years since the major glacier surged across the foot of this side glacier.
It's been different. I didn't really expect it to be quite like this. I expected it to be more backpacking, less science and that sort of thing. I think we've learned how to cope with that sort of thing. It's becoming easier as we get fitter and more used to the loads and things.
What is it you're doing here, then?
See how much the ice has melted down.
They come here and they don't just rush all over the country as tourists. They actually find out something about it at the same time. And in that 6 weeks, they take back a bit of the place in them.
About 8 centimetres.
8 centimetres a day.
8 centimetres going down a day. So all this water that's pouring down is from that?
Yeah.
Comes from here.
After the chaos of the first 10 days training period, the scientific phase, the 3 weeks, sort of steadied things out. And I was then able to get round and visit all the groups on their sciences. And 3 of us went out because of glacier travel. Anything really, it's better to travel with 3. These glaciers here are different from anything I know in Antarctica, because here the glacier is bare ice virtually and very shallow, very gentle slope on both the main glaciers. And the particular glacier we did most had virtually no crevasses. What it did have, which I hadn't met before, was lovely meltwater streams which went quite often across the glacier, carved their way about 30 feet down into the glacier. Usually it was quite narrow, so you could jump across or go across a little bridge. It's great to see people on this expedition carrying things forward. Perhaps some of the things we've done have helped put them on that way, but in fact, most of it comes from them. We just make it possible for them to do it, and they do it all themselves.
Yeah. I wanted to do something completely different for a summer holiday, get away from it all. I think 6 weeks with people who you've never met before as well is a good idea, considering you've just left school.
3.685. Middle, 3.
The survey group was surveying a small area underneath a marvellous little mountain called Colosseum, named after the Colosseum in Rome because of the fluting on the limestone above it. And they're surveying a small area associated with the terminal moraines of the glacier which surged 100 years ago. Finished for the day then, Paul?
Pardon?
Finished for the day.
Yeah, we have.
Completely different to whatever I've done before. I've done a bit of walking, but never on glaciers or ice. And the mountain training's been completely different. Crevasse rescues. It's not the sort of thing I'm going to learn at home.
Not many people have actually been here, have they? The Cairngorms, anybody can actually go there if they want to. But it's a bit more of an achievement to come here. When you go back home, you really will appreciate it.
So far, they've been studying the terrain and observing the island's wildlife. But today, they're traveling across a vast fjord looking for a man, the only person who actually lives in this frozen wilderness.
Our nearest neighbour in Svalbard is a trapper called Harald Solheim. He lives at a very small hut, which is about 14 kilometres away from our base camp by water. And he's our only person living within 30, 40 kilometres of us. Every now and again you'd find a seal on a small floe of ice. They love lying on ice. They feel safer, and you find one, you could creep up to it, and sometimes they let the boat get quite close. The first thing you can see from furthest away is a sort of black gantry, it looks, and this is where the trapper has the seal meat for his dogs. They are his livelihood. He traps foxes, and he's allowed to shoot a couple of reindeer a year. But he's living there, he's self-contained, he's self-sufficient, like the other 4 trappers there are in Svalbard. And that's 5 trappers for the place the size of Scotland.
Chris Furs has been curious to meet this extraordinary Arctic hermit, a man who spends 6 months of the year in polar darkness with a shortwave radio, his only contact with the rest of the world. And he's a Norwegian microbiologist who came here for a break from civilization and never went home.
Russians arrive 4:10 in the night. They always comes 4:00 in the night.
Why you came here?
I have always had a dream of going to Spitsbergen trapping during the winter. When I was a little boy, I was wondering if one could stand it without turning mad. No, I was without jobs, I had some money, and I had no family. I could do just what I wanted to do, and for once in my life, I could do what I wanted to do for 1 year. And that was the
10 years
beginning.
ago.
Yes, it is now 10 years ago. The time passes so very fast. It's much more quiet from late September and until beginning of March. I usually don't see a living soul.
Nobody? For 6 months?
No.
Yeah.
Well, it has passed. It has been years where there haven't been any people at all.
Yeah.
And also the snow conditions. The first year I was living out there, the only thing that got over the surface of the snow was my flagpole and the chimney pipe.
Yeah. And that drifts right there.
I had cereal every morning when I opened the door. It was only a white wall. So I had serious plans of making a hole in the roof to get out in an easy way.
Hermit trappers like Harold Soldheim are the only people who live here now. The old plunderers, the whalers and the sealers are long gone. The benevolent new invaders are itinerant scientists and conservationists, and these days even some young explorers. They pass over the landscape, leaving no mark, and then nature claims back its wilderness.
Last month, the Odyssey film crew went north to the barren wastes of Spitsbergen to join an expedition of young adventurers exploring that remote Arctic island. This month, we catch up with them again, investigating the island's prolific bird life.
Rubbish tips, slag heaps and coal dust are already a fact of life here in the Arctic, as the demand for coal, oil and gas allow the industrialists to invade even this far corner of the earth. But Spitsbergen has more to offer than just mineral wealth. This remote and imposing land is one of the world's last remaining wildernesses. For the few short months of the Arctic summer, Spitsbergen is a surprising meeting point for wildlife from as far afield as West Africa and the Antarctic. Along the coast and in the valleys, carpets of flowers come alive with the onset of spring, while seabird populations flourish on the rich pickings in the surrounding seas warmed by the Gulf Stream. During the summer, this outpost of life was visited by a party of young explorers from Britain.
So we've got fulmars to look out for, glaucous skulls, and in particular there's some barnacle geese, but they're very difficult to see.
Richard from Kent is one of a small group who, together with Freugis, who had joined the expedition from Norway, and Sally from Edinburgh, are here to study bird life under the guidance of geography teacher Mark Evans from Somerset.
You've not used them yet. If we get up that scree slope, which you can see, I think we'll actually be able to look down into the nests rather than look up and not see anything. Okay? What we're basically up here to do is to do a census of seabird colonies for the Norwegian Polar Institute. They've asked us to enter everything that we find, the numbers of the breeding birds and how many different species of birds we find on one cliff, of fledging dates when the birds actually leave the cliffs, to see whether there's been a fall or an increase in the populations up here. Every group has to take a rifle because you have the polar bears on the coast and you have the foxes, which are rabid in the mountains, so you have to cover yourself for those.
Ornithologists rely on amateur birdwatchers like these to fill in the overall picture of life on Spitsbergen.
You see the white part up there, and a big locust gull to the right, and to the left, two barnacle geese.
Like most of the birds here, Spitsbergen's barnacle geese are unable to cope with the rigours of an Arctic winter. They fly south, gathering in their thousands to spend the winter months on the Solway Firth, which is rather warm by comparison. A bird which is a rare sight in Britain is the glaucous gull. Their occasional appearances make the national newspapers, but here they're not uncommon. The fully grown adult is a large and powerful predator at the top of the food chain here. And both young and adults are voracious eaters. Spitsbergen is a difficult area to move around in. A journey which would take several weeks overland on foot can be cut to just a few hours by water. The young explorers, with the help of professional boatmen, are able to visit places they wouldn't otherwise have seen. Compared with many other parts of the world, the variety of life here is rather limited. There are fewer than 40 different breeding birds, not many different flowers, and no small mammals. The young scientist's observations in this fragile environment could show up changes that indicate pollution locally or out in the ocean currents. On their way across the fjord to a small island, the young explorers passed the glacier, Svalbard.
It was amazingly bright with all this, the sun shining off the ice. You were practically dazzled too. And it was just, this whole scale of it was so massive. But it was unbelievable. I like it. I think it's the best bit of the whole Svalbard.
Svalbard surged forward in the latter part of the last century. But when the great glacier began retreating, an island gradually appeared offshore in its wake. Koraholm was not on the map in 1870. Devoid of life only a century ago, the colonization of its new surfaces, its wildlife and its wastes of raw moraines are of special interest to the young explorers.
I think it's important that young people should have a chance to come on these sort of expeditions to places like this, in that it takes them away from an environment which they believe is the only environment in which to live in. And you come here and you just get down to basic living.
I think I've learned a lot from on the bird side of it, as well as living with people. And also about washing up.
Like the birds feeding, the group can take advantage of the continuous daylight to explore their private island.
The thing which makes this place special is just so pristine and clear, the air, the water. I think you tend to get very possessive about places like this, that you hate people intruding.
Well, it's amazing, especially when it's so calm. Today and see all the mountains reflecting the lochs. It's brilliant.
The environment around here is always very impressive. Just come over the brow of the hill. There are these lakes. It's more like an oasis, full of life, whereas other parts of the island are totally dead. So you never quite know what to expect.
The Arctic tern, or sea swallow, is the greatest traveller in the animal kingdom. It spends most of its life on the wing, commuting twice a year between here in the Arctic, where it nests, and the Antarctic. In its lifetime of about 25 years, it flies the equivalent of a trip to the moon and back. Bird watching in such magnificent surroundings may not seem much like work, but for these youngsters, it can mean walking for several days at a stretch, then hours of sitting still, whatever the weather, just waiting for something to appear. Then, along comes a long-tailed duck with her chicks. Or a magnificent red-throated diver in full summer plumage. And the hours of patience have paid off. Another sight for sore British birdwatchers' eyes is the grey phalarope. Occasionally in the autumn, the lightweight phalaropes get blown onto our coasts while flying to their wintering area at sea off West Africa. What Spitsbergen lacks in variety of species, it makes up for in the unspoiled habitats and the sheer numbers of birds which spend the summer months here.
The long-tailed duck is not on the island now.
No, we've lost him, I think, to another lake. That diver's getting pretty close to the nest again. See the skew over there?
It's a special feeling walking on the sort of ground and see the birds, and it's so untouched. I think it's very amazing.
Arctic skewers save some of their energy for dive-bombing attacks on birdwatchers and other unwelcome visitors, often drawing blood in determined attempts to scare intruders away from their nesting sites. They're the pirates of the Arctic, intent on stealing the meals of other seabirds and plundering the eggs and chicks from their nests.
Do you think a skew has eaten it?
Skew or a glaucous gull, possibly.
Yeah.
The bird life of Spitsbergen, such as this king eider, can serve as an early warning. If the populations begin to decline, it may be an indication that something is wrong in this Arctic wilderness.
Can you see the king eider with the... How many chicks? 4? The thing that gets me most, I think, is just the isolation. It's just incredible, the 24 hours of daylight and continue surrounded by these superb vistas of mountains and fjords and all the wildlife, which is absolutely unique to the Arctic. Thursday the 6th of August, day 25. The best day of the expedition yet. Bright blue skies and virtual flat calm. Visited the glacier's snout of Svalbard. The scale was unbelievable. Totally different to what I'd previously expected.
It's just so quiet here. There's no sign of any other humans here at all. All the footprints here are ours.
It's now 5 to 2 in the morning and it's bright sunlight.
With plans to extract vast quantities of oil and gas from the bedrock beneath the great glaciers, the need to monitor the health of the environment here has never been greater.